So the first question that I had for all of you who are attending today was, why are you here? Are you a life coach already? Are you interested in being a life coach? And a lot of you are answering, yes, I am interested in being a life coach, right? Just wanted to learn more about coaching. For number 3, and I want to ask you to elaborate, is there anyone who's here, if you want to, who's looking into being a client for a life coach, who's more interested in learning about what life coaching is about? Because I did put on the advertisement for the course that it's about life coaching. You might want to be a life coach. You might want to hire a life coach. Okay, great. So Giselle, you're on both sides. You might want to have a life coach, might want to be a life coach. And that's really interesting because many of us do both. Many of us who are life coaches also have our own coaches who we are very, very grateful for. So, okay, so most of you are here because you're interested in life coaching. So what the heck is a life coach? We hear this term, it's becoming more and more popular, and many people have the wrong idea about what a life coach is. I did myself. I had no idea what a life coach was before I became one. So I thought it would be fun to do a workshop to answer these questions. What is a life coach? Do I need one? Should I become one? So one of my first answers is that life coaches are many, many different people for many, many walks of life. It can be a fantastic full-time career, and it can also be a wonderful side gig, if you will. So some of you I know have full-time jobs and you're thinking, well, maybe, I could do a little bit of coaching on the side. And it's fantastic for either of those or anything in between. Many people also want to be life coaches eventually, so they transition out of their full-time career and into coaching over what can be a very long period of time, maybe years. And some people want to do it full time because they have family commitments and other obligations where they're not able to work full time. So it's a fabulous option for all of those situations. And I'll answer any questions you have as we move through about any of those particular situations. So my first point is that life coaches come from every discipline, every field you can imagine, and include people who are just interested in life coaching and do not necessarily have a college degree or a certification, but they're passionate about helping people. And so they learn about life coaching and become life coaches. There are many, many incredibly successful life coaches who are making great money and are very well respected and don't have any certification. Now, I'm a fan of certification. I have 2 certifications, as you can see on my slide here. I'm certified by the Life Coach School as a life coach and weight loss coach, and I'm certified by the International Coaching Federation as an associate certified coach. So I'm a fan of certifications because I learned so much through those programs, but many people do it without the certification. It's up to you. It's something to consider. And so I'm going to use myself as an example of how most of the life coaches I come across have done many, many different things in their life prior to becoming a life coach or in addition to learning to be a life coach. So I'll just use myself as an example. I only became a life coach in the last few years. So who was I before that? I was a communication studies part-time professor at California State University, Northridge for 28 years. So I kind of saw myself as a coach, 28 years in the classroom and office hours and all of that. But once I went through coaching certification and really studied it, I realized that what I was doing in the classroom was teaching, and what I was doing in office hours was advising. It was not coaching. So I really learned the definitions of the terms much more clearly and how they apply to different situations when I went through certification and when I did a lot of self-study as well. So I also am a speaker, and I train people on public speaking. I have a TEDx talk called How Public Speaking Will Change Your Life. I'd love it if you watch and share it, please. It's out there for free for people to learn and to be encouraged to develop their public speaking skills and to overcome the fear of public speaking. I also have a company called Sampson Coaching and Consulting. So all of the years that I was teaching at the university communication courses, I was also building my consulting business, which used to just be called Sampson Communication Consulting. And when I really got into coaching, I changed my business name to Sampson Coaching and Consulting, because coaching and consulting and training and mentoring and all of these different terms mean very, very different things. So my decision to change my company name, while it was the same acronym and it didn't seem very different to a lot of people, signified something very, very different for me. And I'll explain that a little bit when we talk about the differences between coaching, therapy, consulting, mentoring, and some of these terms that are often conflated and used interchangeably when they really are different forms of assistance. So I also have a book called Communication Secrets for Success. And I highly recommend that you all write a book on whatever you're passionate about and put it out there into the world. My book is self-published, it's on Amazon, and it helps to give me some credibility in all of the worlds that I'm in, the coaching world, the consulting world, the training world, and when I was teaching as well. So that's me. The reason I got into life coaching, to be really honest and real with you, is because I sought a life coach myself. And initially, I sought out a life coach for weight loss. I was not happy with putting on some pounds as I was getting older and realizing that I really was not fueling myself in the ways that were the most healthy for me. And I wanted to take off some pounds. And so I hired a life coach who was certified by the Life Coach School, which also includes the weight loss component. And she was fantastic. Dr. Deb Butler. She has a podcast. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend her work if you want to check her out. And then I learned about the program that she went through. I fell in love with it. I started listening to the Life Coach School podcast. Highly, highly recommend that. And I just couldn't get enough of it. And I decided, really without much of a plan, because I was already doing executive coaching and public speaking coaching and communication coaching, I've got to get a life coach certification with this school. It's amazing. The tools, the models that are used, the ways that the coaches learn to coach people. I started listening to other life coach school coaches podcasts and watching their videos, and I just wanted to be a part of it and learn all of the tools. So that was in 2018. Gina, who you see here, was my classmate, and we were in class together for, gosh, I guess it was 6 to 8 months, the program, but we just really bonded and got to know each other very well, because there's a lot of coaching that happens in the coaching program, and outside of the coaching program, we're required to do a lot of hours coaching each other. So it was fantastic. Then I couldn't get enough, and I decided to become certified by the International Coaching Federation as well, which was a whole different process. And the reason that I really did that was because I wanted to learn more and see what different coaching certification programs are like, but also because in the corporate world, which is really where my business lives mostly, we have many corporate clients and have for over 20 years. Names like the International Coaching Federation, CTI, which is, I'm not going to remember. Does anybody know? Want to put it in the chat? I think it's Coaching Training Institute, something like that. There are so many coach certification programs, right? Some of the names of coaching certification programs, the brands, have a little bit more legitimacy in the corporate world, even though I feel they're all excellent. So I wanted to have that certification to learn. And also because the ICF certification is required for many corporate programs where outside coaches are contracted. So that's my whole story. Any questions? Well, if there are any questions, I'll check the chat. But if not, I will move into what I'm going to cover, and then I'll ask for questions between each section. So I got some feedback from some of you who were going to be here today, and have had conversations with some of you about what did you want to learn. And so I tried to base what I prepared for today on some of the input that I got. And so I wanted to talk about what are the differences between being a life coach or just a coach in general, whatever kind of coach you label yourself, executive coach, weight loss coach, mindset coach, performance coach, business coach. There are so many different coaches. You can call yourself whatever you like. I wanted to talk about the difference between coaching and therapy. And as I said, other types of support and assistance, such as mentoring and consulting and training. So differentiate and see what questions you have about that. Then I want to talk about certification programs, what they're like, and what coach training is like, and what coaching skills are the most important to acquire and to really hone and develop as you become a more and more seasoned coach. So coaching, what are the differences between coaching and other forms of support? What are coaching certification programs like? And what are the most important coaching skills? So that's the plan. Sound good? What do you think? What is the difference between life coaching and therapy, and coaching and therapy in general? I got so lucky when I was preparing this workshop, because the Life Coach School, after I scheduled this workshop, the Life Coach School released a podcast, the entire 45-minute podcast on the difference between life coaching and therapy. And the speakers on that podcast were 4 individuals who are life coaches who are certified by the Life Coach School and are also therapists. So I highly recommend that episode. It's either episode 338 or 339. Just check out the Life Coach School podcast. So if you really want more, please go check that out. But because that came out after I was planning this, I was able to add to what I already had planned to share with you today in a really meaningful way that was very valuable for me. So here's a quote from one of the lovely women who was on that podcast, who was a therapist as well as a life coach certified by the same school that I'm certified with. And so she said the difference really is that therapy is when you're having a problem, you're sub-functioning and you want to get back to baseline. Okay. And coaching is really when you're at baseline already, you're functioning, but you want to optimize how you're doing. Okay. So coaching is really about setting goals and having accountability and really stretching yourself and moving out of your comfort zone to go after the things that you want to really up level your life, right? Whereas in therapy, that can happen in therapy as well. So I'm a huge fan of therapy. I want to say, definitely, I have been in therapy. I have been in coaching. I am a coach. I am not a therapist, but it's really interesting to see how in the beginning of life coaching, when the industry really was new and getting off the ground, there was this sense of competition, and where therapists, maybe people thought that therapists were the real deal and life coaches were a scam, right? Or a sham. And that's really not true anymore. Many people are both life coaches and therapists, and they work together really well. So this quote, I think, summarizes it well, but a little bit more that I want to say, just a couple more points about this. A therapist has much more education. Important to know, no denying this. So a therapist typically has a master's degree or a PhD versus most coaching certification programs are 6 to 12 month programs. They are very intensive. They can be very, very intensive, so that there are a lot of requirements in that 6 to 12 months. And when I entered into both of the ones that I did, I really had no clue what I was getting myself into. They were a lot of work in a great way. I mean, really rigorous in a way that they should be, I believe, because you're working with people's lives and their minds and their dreams. And it's really important to be well prepared for that. Here's the longer description that came from much of my research and a lot of information that was out there from the sources that I consulted. And again, it elaborates and gets at the differences between the depth of the education and training and tools that therapists typically acquire, right? Diagnosing and treating depression, anxiety, PTSD, eating disorders, addiction. These are all areas, by the way, that life coaches are very carefully trained not to enter into. We are not trained for this. This is not our realm. And we are taught to have very, very clear boundaries not to go into these areas. And for me, when my clients or people come to me and these are the things that they need assistance with, I always have referrals to appropriate therapists who are trained in these specialties, okay, in these areas. Now, coaches can coach people, again, who are functioning, but really want to excel and take their life into new territory and push themselves to grow and to maybe continue their education or grow their business, or like I have weight loss. So the difference would be, an eating disorder would be therapy. Weight loss, where someone doesn't have an eating disorder, but recognizes that they're using food to buffer and to numb emotions that they're not really dealing with. We absolutely work in that realm in coaching, and we learn a lot about how to support people with habit change and getting into their brain and rewiring their brain and understanding how their thinking is and their past and their limiting beliefs is shaping their results and their outcomes. So we get into all of that. We can really help with relationship health and really changing the way that people interact, communication, mindset, all of that. So hopefully that really differentiates therapy and coaching. I have one more slide on this. I think this is the last slide on this, which is really about some differences in methods, but there are also a lot of similarities, believe it or not. So things like EMDR, prescribing medication. So on the podcast, I was talking about where there are therapists who are also life coaches. One is a psychiatrist, and she talks about how she's a doctor and she's licensed to practice medicine. She's licensed to prescribe medication. Of course, that would never be something that someone who's just a coach and doing life coaching or any kind of coaching can do, right? But believe it or not, many of our tools do overlap in a lot of areas. And here's one that I want to share specifically, and it really relates to cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm not, again, a cognitive behavioral therapist, but I've studied it pretty extensively and found it fascinating that a lot of coaching models that are thought models that help us see our limiting beliefs, that help us see what we're thinking and how what we're thinking is shaping our feelings and our actions. That really is the core. There's a lot more to cognitive behavioral therapy, but that really is the core of cognitive behavioral therapy, as you can see in this model, right? So this is from a cognitive behavioral therapy model, which simply says our thoughts create our feelings, our thoughts create our feelings drive our actions, right? Most people don't know this. They think the things that are happening to them, they think their feelings are created by things in the outside world. That's actually not true. Our feelings are created by our thoughts about what's happening in the outside world, how we interpret, how we perceive, how we filter, the lens through which we're seeing. We know this is true because the same exact circumstance out in the world could be happening to two different people. One person's happy about it, one person's upset about it. That's because they're thinking something different about it. This is cognitive behavioral therapy, working with people on issues such as catastrophic thinking, ruminating, right? You can look up all of the thought loops and thought traps that they talk about in cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, in the life coach school, we talk about something that's very similar that's called the self-coaching model, which says that circumstances out in the world trigger thoughts in our mind, which create our feelings, which generate our action or drive our action, which create our results in our life, right? So I'll give you a really simple example. We use this in weight loss a lot. So I lost weight when I first started coaching. I realized that deep in my subconscious, a thought that I didn't know was always, my weight always goes back to X. No matter what I do, I go on a diet, I exercise, or I don't, my weight always goes back to X. This was like a deep, deep limiting belief thought, way ingrained, wired into my brain, right? When I uncovered that with my coach, but the feeling that created was defeated. So I would go on a diet for a while. I could lose weight for months, sometimes even a year, right? But that thought would always creep back and bubble back up and lead me to feel defeated and compulsive about eating more and eating for emotion rather than fuel. And so my action would be then to overeat, right? So when I did the deep work in coaching of rewiring my brain to change the thought, which took really like a year time of deep, deep work, to the thought, I can eat for fuel, I can be healthy, I can be my ideal weight, not just always stuck at this weight that I've convinced myself in my mind that my body has to be. And so then over that long period of time, I lost 15 pounds without trying to get to any weight, but just realizing that the thought that I had to always be that weight simply wasn't true. That I could think, well, I'm just going to eat really healthy and practice these healthy eating habits and these exercise habits and feel really empowered and positive and determined. And then my action was just to eat healthy, live a healthy lifestyle. And the result was losing 15 pounds, which I've now kept off for 2 years. So weight loss is just an easy example, but I've applied it in increasing my business. I've applied it in improving my relationships. And I've helped all of my clients apply this self-coaching model to their lives in a variety of areas in their life. So this is an example of where therapeutic practices such as cognitive behavioral therapy and our self-coaching model really do overlap. And that's why a lot of therapists who do both say that they're able to bring in tools from both worlds to really, really support people in a myriad of ways. Okay, so that's the difference between therapy and coaching. I wanted to briefly touch on a couple of other words that you're probably familiar with, and this is really delineated really, really well in the coaching programs, that coaching is not consulting. I don't know if any of you know the acronym SME. It's used in the corporate world all the time. SME stands for subject matter expert. So I am a subject matter expert in communication. So my corporate clients come to me to develop communication training programs. We're currently in the process of designing and delivering a slew of communication training programs where we're going to be consulting on instructional design, on virtual facilitation, and we are going to be facilitating these programs. And I'm going to be teaching people about developing public speaking skills and about thriving in change and communicating around change. That's because I'm a consultant there. I'm a subject matter expert in communication. I have a master's degree in communication, right? That is not coaching. Okay. I'm also a trainer. So trainer, just because you're a trainer doesn't mean you're a coach. Training is basically teaching, but in a training room, and it's usually a little more interactive than teaching, but I think teaching should be interactive as well, in fact. And mentoring is also something different. People sometimes think that mentoring and coaching is the same thing. Mentoring usually means that the mentor has more experience, is further along in a particular area of, again, expertise, right? And is going to mentor that person to get their skill level up to where the mentor's skill level is. So I might mentor someone in their public speaking skills if they're really nervous about public speaking. And I have a lot of experience teaching public speaking and as a public speaker. So I might be a mentor. That's not the same as coaching. Okay. So coaching is something very different, which we are going to talk about in a minute. What is coaching? But let me pause here and ask what questions you have about the differences. First of all, let's see a 1 in the chat. If it is more clear to you now, put a 1 and let me know if I did my job or not. If it's more clear to you now, the difference between coaching and therapy and mentoring and consulting and training than it was before.
You said put a 1?
Put a 1. Yeah, let's see a 1. This is just a quick feedback mechanism that I've seen a lot of facilitators use on Zoom to check in with the audience. If you can put a 1, if you know more about now the difference between coaching and consulting, training, especially therapy, which I got into a lot, right? Okay, good. Okay, it looks like everybody's saying yes. And Gina has a great question. How do you just describe counseling? So my understanding is that counseling is a word for therapy, that you can call therapy counseling as well. And I have heard that said in some of the talks that I've listened to on this topic, but I want to open it up to the audience, either in the chat or if someone wants to come on and unmute. Does someone have a really clear description of the difference between counseling and therapy? I know that, okay, so sometimes therapy is called counseling. I also know that sometimes things that are called counseling are not therapy. So for instance, a high school counselor, a college counselor, right? Sometimes students, I know, having taught at the university for many years, would call their advisor, their academic advisor, their counselor. Do you ever hear that, Giselle? We have Giselle as an academic advisor, right? Has been an academic advisor, Dr. Johnson. And so sometimes, right, an academic advisor or a high school counselor, right? So that's not necessarily a therapist. Okay. So hopefully it's more clear. Any other questions? All right. Do you want to hear a little bit about what a life coach is and how you become a life coach? Yes? Okay. Okay, good. All right. So first I'm going to talk about the Life Coach School. I highly recommend listening to the Life Coach School podcast. I've said that several times, but this is the one place where you really can get a very in-depth glimpse into coaching models, tools, coaching thinking, coaching practices, coaching questions. What do we learn as coaches? It's all in the podcast, but it doesn't go anywhere near as deep as the coach certification program. Sometimes people will say, well, there's over 300 podcasts for this life coach school. Why wouldn't I just listen to all the podcasts? I do recommend listening to all the podcasts. And yes, I'm crazy. I have listened to all 339 or 340 of the podcasts because I love them and I learned so much. But you will not get what you would get in certification, because what you get on the podcast is really meant for everyone and for coaching yourselves and possibly others if you want to give it a try. But in certification, you go into so much more depth and you're required to practice and demonstrate mastery of the skills. So it's really, really different. So in the Life Coach School program, it was roughly 6 months. We had 2 classes a week, one class with Brooke, who runs the school, who you see right here, and then one class in a small cohort with, I think we had 10 people. We got really close. We coached each other. We really dove into the principles and the concepts for the week. Our coach teacher was very rigorous in applying in helping us apply the concepts and demonstrate the concepts. And so we got a lot of feedback from her. It really helped us to work hard to apply the principles appropriately and properly. And we often had to I had to take tests over and over. I had to do practice coaching and demonstrate coaching over and over and over because I didn't get the principles correct in the first few tries. So it was very, very rigorous. Monthly quizzes. I failed several of the quizzes and had to retake them. This is someone who has a master's degree, had a 4.0 in my master's degree. So it was very, very humbling to have to retake several of the quizzes and to fail them. So it was very rigorous. And it wasn't that it was tricky. It was just that they really, really wanted you to show that you understood. And when you're really dealing with people's lives, you really had to, you couldn't take it lightly, and you could not just kind of skate through and not really, really study very hard. So Gina's saying she went through the Life Coach School with me, and that is true. She knows everything I'm saying is true. She says it was phenomenal. We pushed ourselves, and the content we received was so applicable to our lives. Definitely rigorous. And Gina, I hope you don't mind me saying, Gina has her master's degree in engineering. So we are 2 very educated people saying this was an incredibly hard, incredibly rigorous program. And that's not to scare you away. I say, go for it. You can do it. You don't have to have a master's degree. You don't have to have any degree to do it. We had people in our class who had no education beyond high school, and they were amazing. We're just saying, be ready to study hard, to demonstrate the skills, to be evaluated repeatedly and not to pass, and to be told why you didn't pass, and to get lots of coaching. It's a fantastic experience. I grew through that experience like really like nothing else in my life. It was amazing. I would do it again. I really loved it. At the end, there's a lot of work to get certified. A 4-hour exam. You must create a video of yourself teaching a concept with very specific guidelines. Many people had to resubmit their videos. I almost did. I made my video over and over. You have to submit a coaching session of you coaching someone who's willing to have you submit your coaching with them. Many of us had to resubmit coaching sessions we didn't pass the first time. And the Life Coach School requires yearly recertification. So we're all coming up on recertification, and there are all sorts of courses you have to take and test another 4-hour exam. And you have to prove that you're either earning a living as a life coach or that you're doing life coaching free, but you're doing a lot of it. So you have to prove that you're active in your field, and you have to meet a lot of requirements to get certified every year. And they change and add to the certification every year so that whatever's relevant that's happening in the world is incorporated as well. So this year, we're also required to do suicidal ideation training to understand that, so that we, not because we're coaching people in that area, but so that when we really understand when to refer. And we're also required to do diversity training to re-certify this year because of obvious reasons, everything that's happening in the world. And I'm totally on board, of course, with all of that. So the other program that I did, and then I'll see what questions everyone has about these 2 programs or about coach certification in general. Question from Janice: LCS is not a certification. It is. Yeah. So let me clarify, because I know it can be confusing because there are so many different certification programs. The Life Coach School definitely does offer a coach certification program. And that is what I just described. It is very rigorous. It is 6 months. You have to go through all of what I just described to get certified. You need to go through all of the bullet points that I just covered in this slide to be certified as a life and weight coach with the Life Coach School. You can see that little black certification, that is my certification stamp. So you only get that once you've gone through, and you can only keep it if you recertify and go through everything for recertification. Now, the Life Coach School also has a free, available to everyone, amazing podcast with over 330 episodes that teach amazing principles that will absolutely help you in your life. That is completely separate from the certification process, but it's the same tools, just not at the level of depth that we learn them in certification. Does that clarify? Hopefully, I hope that clarifies. Let me just check the chat really quick. Another note about LCS from Gina, who's also certified, is those of you thinking of signing up for certification, it was the most expensive. Yes, this is true. I am not going to talk about prices. I really thought about that, and I want to honor my teachers because everyone's got their own process for bringing people into their school and teaching, sharing with them what they teach and what the certification process is. And at some point along that process, through capturing your email or engaging you in maybe a class to teach you about the certification, and then you learn what the price is. I actually respect that and honor that, because if I just go ahead and say, well, this certification is this much and this is this much, you don't have any context, and it's not up to me to share that. And also the prices change. So I don't know that what I paid would be the same as what you would find out. You can easily find out if you're really serious about it by reaching out to the Life Coach School and doing their intake process for people who are interested in certification. And then you can always unsubscribe or whatever it may be. So the issue Janice may be referring to is ICF certificate. Oh, yes. Thank you. So Life Coach School certification, coach certification, is totally different from International Coach Federation certification. Totally separate, totally different. I did both. Not at the same, it would not have been for me, it would not have been humanly possible to do both at the same time. I did one, I finished it, which really took like a year when you really go through all the steps, right? And you do all the testing and everything that's required. Then maybe 6 months later, I started the ICF Coach Certification. And that took a year to go through all of the steps. So I have two totally separate certifications. I hope that clarifies that. So here we have the International Coach Federation certification. Okay. This was totally different from the Life Coach School. So first of all, you have to take an approved training course to apply for certification for the International Coach Federation, or it's often called International Coaching Federation. ICF is what most people know it as. You must take a course first that's separate from the ICF, but that's approved by the ICF. Okay. So that's why I have the two logos here. I was lucky enough to have a friend who's ICF certified recommend the training course that she did, which is called Fast Track Coach Training Academy. So they are not ICF, but they are ICF approved as a training course. So that was about 8 months. Okay. So that's bullet point 1 that I have here on my slide. During that process, you must do 100 hours of coaching, and it's required for a certain amount of those hours to be paid. So the ICF only wants to certify people who have lots of practice coaching and who are getting paid for some of their coaching. Now, the trick is, there are lots of ways around that. If that concerns you, you can have someone pay you $1 for coaching. Okay. You can also, there are groups of coaches who support each other through this process that are separate, where they contract with each other to pay each other the same fee to do practice coaching. So I was already coaching, so I was able to do all 100 of my hours as paid coaching, which is great. So it worked really well for me because I'd already been certified and I was already a communication coach for over 20 years when I did this. But the certification, again, I learned a tremendous amount. It's a fabulous program. I loved the teachers in the Fast Track Coach Academy. They were so supportive. So we had class once a week. You have to pass the training course. Again, you have to do a coaching session submission. Many people have to resubmit. Now, this is where we move into, once you complete everything for the approved course, then they pass you get a certificate from them. So I got my certificate from Fast Track Coach Training Academy. Then I could apply to ICF. So you can't apply to ICF until you have your certification from an ICF approved coach training program. Hopefully that makes sense. So once I had my fast track certificate, I could go to the ICF, and that again is a bit of a rigorous process. This is where you submit to them a coaching certification. You take their 3-hour test on all their coaching principles and models and practices and tools, and they only require recertification every 3 years. So I just got my certification with ICF, so I'm good for 3 years. I do have to recertify with the life coach school, which is totally separate. So I'm getting ready to do a lot of study and preparation and all the extra courses that we have to do this year to recertify at the end of this year. So what questions do you have about coach certification? I have one more topic, which is what are the most important skills that all coaches need to acquire and hone? But my question for you is, what questions do you have about becoming a coach certification?
My question would be, in terms of the certification process, what was the hardest part for you? Was all parts of the program equally as rigorous for you?
It's a really good question. For me, the hardest part was testing and coaching submissions. And failing some of the tests and some of the quizzes. As you know, so like I said, someone who, when I was a student, was very, very serious about my grades and, and took that very seriously. It was really hard to be learning all new concepts. For instance, the self-coaching model, which I shared in about 5 minutes, goes into so much more depth, and they would give us really, really difficult, convoluted, complex scenarios that we had to figure out. How would you create a self-coaching model on this? How would you apply this principle to this situation? What would you say to this client? What kinds of questions would you ask? And so I would come up with answers that I thought were great and that I was using and getting paid and coaching. Nope, that's not really the best choice in this situation. So it was really, really challenging for me to learn the specifics of each program and what they were looking for, if that makes sense. And one thing I'll say about coaching, it comes in the next section, which is coaching skills, which are really, really different, again, from therapy, from mentoring, from training, teaching, any of that. We're not supposed to give any advice as coaches. So I knew people who were also, through networks that I'm in, who were also going through ICF coaching, who had to resubmit their coaching submission multiple times because they crossed that line and gave advice. So really getting comfortable with the true spirit of coaching, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is questioning, really powerful, provocative questioning and paraphrasing and deep, deep listening, those sorts of things. It's very different from what most of us are used to. And so it was very hard for me to incorporate that when I had so many years of feeling like I was a coach. I wasn't a coach. I was mentoring more than I was coaching. So really learning the principles and applying them and demonstrating them was very challenging, and being told that I wasn't doing it right repeatedly, it was hard for me. But now I am so thankful, right? Don't you feel that the most humbling times in your life where you were challenged and stretched to grow and keep trying and failing and keep picking yourself up over and over until you got it and you finally got past whatever that hurdle was, were like the most amazing opportunities to grow and develop your skills and become stronger in whatever skill set it was that you wanted so much to develop. I was dedicated. I was really, really committed. And all the people that were in both of these programs with me were really, really committed, like really high quality, driven people in both programs. There were people, we had a physician, a medical doctor, many people with, with advanced degrees. In my ICF training was a psychologist with her PhD, really successful, driven people. And again, even if they didn't have degrees, like really driven people who push themselves really hard. So that was challenging to rise to the occasion, to rise to the level that I was asked to rise to over and over again, and have to learn a whole new world. It's a great question.
Thank you for asking. I have another question. If you have after, can I ask it now, or do you have to
go ahead and ask it now? Absolutely.
Okay. So I planned, this is what I want to do, and but I don't know whether I want to pursue my master's and get a life coach, or should I not pursue my master's, or whether I should not pursue my master's and pursue, just go straight into a coaching program. How would you say that your master's in comms, because I'm a comms major, how would you say that your master's in comms helped you in this in any way, or helped you in life coaching, or obtaining your life coach certification? Or do you think the experiences are kind of the same?
They've all helped me. They've all
Okay.
built on one another. They all provided things that the others did not.
Oh, gotcha.
So for me, I'm glad I did all of it. I'm glad I didn't do one or the other. But for you, we don't know. So I'm so
Gotcha.
tempted. Will you say your name again for me? I'm so
Uh,
sorry.
Johnny's Calhoun.
Johnny, I'm so tempted to coach you, Johnny's, right?
Yeah.
Because coaching would mean what I just did was advising. I basically said, for me, I did all of it and I feel there was value in all of it. But I would want to coach you and ask you, well, what do you think you would get from a master's? What do you think you would get from life coaching? What is it that you most want to do? Right? What would be the pros and cons of doing this one versus that one? What would be the pros and cons of doing both or doing all of it? Right. So it would be a great coaching opportunity. If I were coaching, I wouldn't have answered your question. I would have given you questions back, because the truth is, you know the answers within yourself. I don't have the answers for you, but you probably would benefit from someone to coach you and ask you those questions and give you their ear and paraphrase what they're hearing you say and guide you to figure that out. Right.
Thank
So
you.
it's a perfect segue into the final topic, core coaching skills. Right. And I've already hinted at or made clear that it is not about giving advice, and the power of questions and paraphrasing and listening to get someone to their own solution and their own decision is amazing. I really didn't believe in it until I saw it over and over again, and until I experienced it over and over again. When you go to someone and say, well, should I do this? For instance, should I get a master's degree or should I get a life coaching certificate? You want someone to give you an answer. Well, go ahead and do this. But that person doesn't know what's right for you, right? So coaching is about asking questions that help lead you to that answer for yourself. And this is what, as you can see on the slide here, one of our very successful coaches in the life coach school, Katrina Yubell, she is a doctor. She's a physician who was unhappy because she was overweight, and she wanted to lose weight because she was using food to numb all the stress in her life as a very busy physician, as a doctor. So she used the tools of a life coach school, became certified as a life coach, and now she's a doctor and a life coach, and she coaches primarily physicians, doctors, busy, stressed out doctors, to lose weight, because she understands that client, that person. So now, and she's telling us, you don't have to have all the answers as the coach. You help people figure things out for themselves, and there is so much power in that. I cannot possibly overstate how much power there is in that. Think about how many times you've gone to someone wanting some guidance and they just said to you, oh, you should just do that. Oh, you just have to get a master's degree. And you're thinking, but wait, I'm considering this and I'm considering that. And you don't even know me. And what about this? And what about that? Right. So coaching generally is a lot more helpful than advice, because advice is so specific for one person. What worked for you isn't necessarily going to work for everyone. So here are the core coaching skills. And I've already really alluded to most of them. So this is a bit of review. Deep, completely judgment-free, completely objective listening. In the life coach school, we call it holding the space. We also call it staying out of the pool. Okay. It's a metaphor that the person you're coaching is in the pool. They're swimming around in the pool, right? With all their limiting beliefs and all their baggage and all their thoughts about what they can't do. And their maybe, self-limiting or harmful behaviors. They're just swimming around in all that. We do not get in the pool with them. Okay. We stay out of the pool. We stay completely dry. It's a metaphor. So it's judgment-free, it's objective. So for example, if a client's like, oh, everything's terrible and this person did this and that and it's horrible, we don't validate and go, oh, you poor thing, it's so horrible. Okay. We just don't. As coaches, it's not helpful. Your best friends can do that. I will do that for you if I'm your friend, by the way. Okay. Big difference between coaching and friendship. I forgot to delineate that. So if you're my friend and you want to vent and complain, go for it. I'll be, if you know me, I'm the most empathetic person. But if I'm your coach, I don't get in the pool with you. We talk about where do you have control? How can you change your situation? Right? Those sorts of things. So deep, judgment-free, objective, also no judgment. So I really want to say, like, people can tell you anything. No judgment, because you don't know what's right for their life. Paraphrasing. Okay, so it sounds like you're saying, right, that you're not sure whether you want to get a master's degree or a life coach certification or both. Is that right? So it's a lot of paraphrasing so that people can hear their own thoughts, because then people will go, oh, did I say that? I didn't realize that's what I was thinking and trying to figure out, right? And checking if it's accurate, always checking, because we filter our perception through our own experiences. So a lot of times as a coach, not a lot of times, but occasionally you paraphrase and you check, and was that right? And the person says, oh, no, that wasn't what I meant or thought I was saying at all. And then you get deeper on what they really mean, reading between the lines. So sometimes people, will come to the session and they're like, I'm fine, I'm not angry, right? And you can tell, and you might say something like, okay, I hear you saying that you're not angry. And it feels like your body language is suggesting that maybe there's some anger in there. Could I be right? Or tell me what's going on there, right? Checking, always checking, but reading between those lines and checking if it's right. Asking powerful questions. So I was going to give some examples, but I'll just say, we're a little short on time. There are so many books and tools about powerful questions. This is one called Power Questions. I have a list of questions that I always keep in front of me from the life coach school when I'm coaching, right? So things like, what do you really want? How could you think differently about that situation? What are other options? What feeling is that thought creating, right? So it is endless. We have lists, hundreds and hundreds of questions, and all coaches have their questions that they like, some popular, other ones in the life coach school. What is the problem? So people will just talk and circle around and around and around and go, what is the problem? Oh, okay, what is the problem? Just questions that get people to focus, questions that get people to dig deeper, questions that get people to see the connection between how their thinking is creating their feelings, which is driving their actions. Lots and lots of questions. Questions are so powerful. Uncovering those subconscious thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions. Many scholars say that most of our thoughts are in the subconscious, so that we don't know we're thinking all these self-defeating thoughts. And when you have a good coach, they draw them out, and you talk to the coach, and the coach says, oh, you just said this. Is that a thought that you're having? I just heard you say this, right? Like Gina and I have done so much coaching, and Gina's just a master of saying, what I noticed you said this, and it's like, did I say that? Am I thinking that? I had no idea that I was thinking that, right? And then you really can go deep into changing it if you want to, or just being aware of it and really seeing what it's creating. Showing clients the thought, feeling, action loop. I already talked about that. Offering resources. So coaches, as we coach more and more and more, our files just grow and grow and grow and grow. So for every coaching client that I have, I create a custom folder for that client in a Google folder. And I put in models and podcast episodes and books and articles. And as much as the client is willing to do extra work outside of our sessions, I will give them endless resources that are customized for them. I'm always thinking of my clients. I'm always on the lookout for books and articles and podcasts, because I love all of that. I read all of that myself. So I have lots and lots that I can share with clients that's customized. Strength spotting. So this was really, really emphasized in the ICF training, that you really try to lift your clients up and help them see their strengths that they might not be seeing, right? So if I'm coaching someone for a while and I really notice that that person is very perceptive about what I'm feeling, like they're always, oh, Bridget, you seem this today. I will say back to them, you're really perceptive about how people feel. I notice that. I notice you always do your assignment very thoroughly. So how does that play a role in the way you're going to approach your attempt to get a promotion at work, right? So strength spotting, pointing out strengths, helping people tie the strengths they may not be seeing to the goals that they're going after. And really clearly assisting with goal setting, but not telling people what their goals should be, asking them, okay, based on this conversation that we've just had in this coaching session, it sounds like you're weighing, right, whether to get your master's degree, whether to get a life coaching, you're researching, you haven't decided yet. So what are 3 things you want to do this week before I see you again next week? to follow up on this, to talk to someone, to do research, to read something. I always, and I have lots of documents that I share with clients about how we coach and what the expectations are. And so in my coaching package, it says that each week you'll assign yourself 3 homework assignments, and then you get to pick them. I can help you if you say, like, what else could I do? I might have ideas, but you ultimately create your own goals and assignments. And what the coach does is provides accountability. And you come back next week and the coach says, okay, how did it go with those 3 things, right? And there's no shame either if you didn't do your 3 things. Remember, number 1, judgment free. So the coach isn't going to be like, oh, I'm disappointed. Someone told me recently that they had a coach and they weren't happy with the coach because the coach would always be disappointed when they didn't do their homework. And it really surprised me and shocked me because in all the coach training I've done now, we're so taught to not do that. It's never about you as the coach. If they didn't do their homework, then you ask, okay, let's talk about what happened. What does that mean? And how do you want to change how we formulate your goals? And it's not about me and how I feel about whether or not someone did something. It's about what's going on for them. So you do provide accountability, but you always adapt, and you don't have all the answers. You do it based on that person and their life. A really good question that came up in the chat is, how do you handle confidentiality between you and your client? This is essential. So I have a coaching contract that I sign, and my coaching clients always sign before we start a coaching engagement. My coaching package and my coaching contract are very, very detailed so that I didn't have this in the beginning when I started coaching, and the ICF is really, really especially big on a clear coaching contract. So we had to create our coaching contract in the ICF program, and I found it really useful. It's very, very clear that everything is completely confidential, similar to therapists, unless there is some kind of threat of harm to self or others, right? So it's very clear, but where it's totally confidential, where this becomes tricky, I shouldn't say tricky, where this can be challenging and has been challenging, it hasn't been challenging for me, but where this line needs to be very, very clearly drawn is with executive coaching, where the company hires you to coach an employee. I have about 5 coaching clients right now who I'm coaching, but their company is paying for the coaching. And one of them is also someone who I am coaching, her boss. So I have to be so clear on my confidentiality. And when I entered into the relationship to coach the person who is on the team of a manager who I coach, I made it clear with both of them that everything would have to be totally confidential, and I would have to be completely unbiased, because I knew that they would be talking to me about each other. And it's been very clean. It's been fine. And there have been no lines crossed, total confidentiality in both relationships. And the same goes with the company that hires me. I do not report back on how the person is doing. And I will work with an individual I'm coaching in a coaching session about what they want to communicate to their manager about what's going on in coaching, but I don't report to the manager about anything that's going on or anything of that nature. This is a good example of the delineation between coaching and consulting as well, because I've had consulting projects where I'm asked to coach someone, but I'm also asked to create a report together with that person, or do a 360 report, which is getting feedback from all their colleagues and putting it into a written summary report about all the areas that that person needs to improve and their strengths. And in that case, it's agreed among all parties, and contracts are signed, that the areas of improvement and development and all of that work will be all out in the open. And it's all very clear in the contracts and the legal wording. So I've done all of that. But pure coaching, 100% confidential. And Janice says, thank you, Janice, because Janice, Dr. Ratter is a clinical psychologist. So I really appreciate you chiming in there that it's the same in therapy and counseling. Yeah. So confidentiality is key, and people need to know that it's completely safe to share anything and everything. And most coaching, even if people enter into coaching with it being called executive coaching or life coaching, it all crosses over. So with my life coaching clients, we talk about their careers and their career goals. With my executive coaching clients, we absolutely get into their family life, their relationships, sometimes their challenges with spouses, all of that we're very, very well trained in the life coaching all of the certification programs. So there's so much crossover. It's really difficult to pick a title of what kind of coach you are, because our lives are all integrated and it all fits together, and it's all welcome in a coaching session. I can't imagine a coaching session where the coach says, we can only talk about these things. Oh, don't talk about your spouse. Don't get into that area. It's all life, right?
So I've noticed, and I've been very perceptive that, life coaching is, and I've seen that it's more of a female dominated field. What advice would you give to, someone like me who's a male of color, and then also maybe just a little younger, who would want to pursue something like this to be able to really, I guess, be taken seriously?
Yes. Thank you so much for asking the question. I think for those very reasons, you're very much needed because many, many men are seeking life coaches. Many people of color are seeking life coaches, people of all backgrounds, and the LGBTQIA community and diverse, communities are all getting more and more involved in coaching, in the coaching field, and they're very, very underrepresented by and large. So I would encourage you and say that would probably, be helpful and be supported. There's a whole podcast from Life Coach School on men as life coaches. So I would love to encourage you to listen to that one. And there are lots of episodes on diversity and lack of diversity in life coaching. And our life coaching school did quite a number of episodes when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening on how the coaching industry has overlooked that realm, and how so many coaches of color started doing training programs. And there was a woman named Trudy LeBron who had a phenomenal coach training program on this issue, and the lack of incorporating diverse perspectives, and the perspectives of coaches of color in the coaching industry and in coach training programs. And so I immediately went to that training. I got so much out of it. I went to other trainings, and our like I said, our coach certification is now requiring this to recertify, right? So people are hungry for more perspectives and people coming in. And it's funny, you said also age, in the life coach school, there are some really young folks, way younger than you. I know you're young, Giselle, but come on, you have your doctorate degree, your EDD, you've been through a lot of education. You can't be that young, right? You look really young. But I've gone to, in the self, I didn't even mention the self-coaching scholars program is another offering of the Life Coach School. It's a membership program. It is a paid membership program. It's $300 a month, $297. That's the marketing, right? I have been a member of that for over 2 years, and you get 20 minutes a week of coaching with one of their coaches as part of the package. I'm not selling it or anything. I just love it. And so every week you get 20 minutes of coaching. So you come really prepared to talk something through. And a couple of the times I've had a really young coach show up, and it kind of strikes me in the beginning, like, wow, I'm going to be 52 this week. I'm going to be 52. And, here I am, this person is probably in their 20s, but if you have got, thank you. If you have got the coaching skills down, and you know how to talk someone through and ask the right questions and paraphrase and really coach them, age does not matter. Differences in background experience, they really don't. They matter in the sense that you've got to be able to understand where someone's coming from, but they are not a barrier to a really beneficial and deep coaching relationship. So I've had some great coaching as someone in my 50s by people in their 20s. And I love it when that happens. It's exciting because we're all offering something a little different and unique. I don't know if that answers your question, Giselle. Let me know.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Other questions? I think we have some in the chat. So there's a question about trying to find the right fit school. And yeah, it's a really good question. Did you want to say more about that question, or just have me go from the chat?
Yes. First, I'd just like to thank you for hosting us today. It's been really helpful just to hear everyone speak, and it's nice to see everybody today. So thank you for letting me be with all of you just to go through this. So really what's going on for me is, and this may be common, but I'm kind of in a period in my life where I've worked in sales and marketing for a great many years. And because of COVID-19, I am a sommelier and a professional wine person. And long story short, I'm looking to really pivot out of that industry. And I want to kind of use the second half of my life to kind of give back and take my communication skills and what I've learned in my life and maybe help others. So the reason why I came here today is I'm not just curious. I've decided that this is the route that I want to go, but I also know that getting my master's degree or my doctorate's degree and spending thousands of dollars and thousands of hours is going to take a little more time than really what I am comfortable with. So I've decided, in lieu of getting my master's degree and going into therapy, I would rather go the life coach route. So I've been doing research just like anybody else would. I'm tapping on the keyboard, I'm reading websites and trying to figure it out for myself. But what I've noticed is there are quite a few different institutions that you can go to get certified, and they range, very drastically in prices. I mean, you could do things as cheap as a Udemy course for like $20 to get an idea. Mm-hmm. And then there's also schools that you can go to that are $11,000 or $12,000 that give you professional certification. So I was just curious, like from my end of things, being in this couch and having been in this house for months now, dealing with COVID-19, I know that some schools aren't available in person. So this whole thing is very confusing for me, because what I'd like to do is use my time right now that I have effectively to try and transition as quickly as possible. So I was just curious, like, for a person such as myself and maybe a few other people here, I'm not sure if we all share the exact same story, but all I'm getting at is I don't know how to distinguish one school from the other in this environment of I'm doing research online. So can you recommend anything that might help me find clarification in that regard?
Well, first of all, it's great that you want to do this. And you reminded me of something that I wanted to say, that if you want to be successful as a coach and actually make money, you've got to learn a little about marketing. So Patrick, you're already saying that you have a marketing background, which if you want to market your coaching, that's going to be really helpful, because it is a requirement. You can't get a life coach certification and then just expect people to knock at your door for coaching, right? And so you've got to have some pretty decent marketing skills and learn about all of the things there are to learn about how to market your coaching skills. So that's going to be really helpful for you. As far as figuring out a school, you've got to figure out the one that's right for you. If you want, it sounds like what you're saying is you want something that you could do relatively quickly for a minimal investment, but you're willing to invest, but not one of the really high end, really expensive ones, right? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like, because I've tried to read into a few of them. Like I saw a top 10 list that was on like the Life Coach, that certifying board that you were speaking of earlier. They had a list of like the top 20 or 10 for 2020. And I looked at them and I just noticed that they varied in pricing, and some are in person and as well as online. And then there's some that are strictly online. And it's not necessarily price. It's just more so I'd like to find something that's quality and something that sort of can get me going in that direction, kind of not rushed, but just like sort of, let's not take a year, maybe less. So maybe I'm answering my own question here.
It sounds like you are. Yeah, it sounds like you're deep in research. You're looking into all of it, and no one else is going to have the answer for you. You're going to get to a point where you feel like you've done the research. Like I said, when I went into my first life coaching certification, I really was familiar with this program in this school, but I had no idea what I was getting into once I signed on for certification. And I that's not helpful to say maybe, but the reality is you can only do your research up to a certain point, use the data you've collected, pick the program that seems like the best fit for you, financially, if it's online, or everything's gonna be online now. But, and what are the principles? What are they teaching? And I would check out reviews. I would talk to people who've been through the program. Most people who've been through a coaching certification if they're happy to tell you, did they like it? What did they like about it? What did they not like about it? I shared all of that today in the workshop. So I would interview people in these programs, but I would look at what are they offering. They really do typically share on their websites and in their marketing materials what you get out of the program, what you're going to get for your investment. So I would keep researching as you are and talk to people and just make the best decision and know. You know, in our life coach school, we talk about decision making a lot and how being an indecision is really uncomfortable and difficult. And people will sometimes wait too long and cause themselves so much suffering in trying to figure out the perfect decision, when at a certain point, it's just time to make a decision.
Sure.
With what you've got.
Okay. So just keep doing what I'm doing, essentially.
Yeah. And I can't tell you what's right for you. Nobody can tell you what's right for you, because you know the criteria you're looking for. You know what kind of coaching you want to do, what you're interested in. It's so custom, it's so individualized, and there's so many programs.
You would agree, though, if it was, in other words, that certifying board, and you'll have to forgive me because I just don't have it right in front of me, but is it the Life Coach Foundation?
So there's the Life Coach School and there's the International Coach Foundation.
That's it.
Totally
ICF.
separate.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the ICF was the one that had the list. And so what you're basically saying is you just find the one that's best for you. But if it is in their purview and a suggestion, then you can assume that it is of quality, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Again, I want to coach you. I want to take an hour and ask you questions, right? Because there's so much you can dive into, but you're doing the research and you'll figure it out. It's a really great thing to do. Having a marketing background is going to serve you really well. And those of you, again, I just want to reiterate, those of you who want to do it, who are resistant to learning marketing techniques and strategies, try to work on that resistance, because it's just a thought. Like people say, oh, I don't like marketing, I don't like selling myself. You just got to change the thought and know that you have an incredibly valuable service to help people, and you're just offering it to people who need it. That's it. Right, Patrick, you probably know all that from
Yeah, I mean, and significant time in sales, it also teaches you how to kind of like overcome fear of rejection and stuff like that too. And like just the confidence that going through getting knocked down and dragged out 100 times has actually built my confidence. And it's one of the things that I want to try and help instill in others, is that like you'll find your way. A lot of times you need to hear no or some weird answer 1,000 times before you realize that it isn't about you. The rejection is 9 times out of 10, it is not about you. And it's a very important lesson to learn. So
exactly. And when you are selling yourself as a life coach, when you're not selling yourself, but when you're sharing with the world the value you can offer people as a life coach and offer it to people who really are in need of a life coach, you will be rejected. You will absolutely have some people that are not interested, or you will have people who will pick another coach. There's often people are interviewing multiple coaches. It happens all the time. And sometimes it's just not a good fit, and you find your people. It's a beautiful thing when you find your people, and you don't worry about the people who found other people. You're happy for them that they found a coach that's a better fit for them. Yeah. It's a great lesson. And as Patrick said, it's not about me. People connect and click for different reasons, and coaches have different personality types and offer different services. So it's a great, I've developed, I don't want to say a thick skin, but really a detachment from something having to happen the way I would like it to happen, and realizing that everything, at least as far as what I'm doing in my career and the things I'm trying to make happen, everything's happening the way it's meant to. If an opportunity passes me by, it wasn't meant to be. Other questions? I'm looking in the chat. People are saying they've got to run. I know we're over time, but I just like to stay and answer whatever questions people have. I see a question. I think I saw Janice and then Kelly. So Janice, then you're up next, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably self-explanatory, but I guess most coaches find an area of specialization or areas that they really like. And I guess part of that would be from your experience or whatever your interest, but I'm wondering about that. And it sounds like it's really important. And, like as a therapist, you can say, I'm doing all these different things and I have these different populations that I see.
Right.
with coaching? How do you deal with that?
That's a really good question. So in most of the coaching programs, and really especially in the life coaching program, we're strongly encouraged and advised to pick a very specific niche. Because if you just go out there, it's like casting this wide net, you get nothing. Just go out there to everybody, I'm a life coach. It's so saturated and you're not going to catch anybody, very few. But if you go out there and you say, like Gina is such a great, I think Gina had to go, but Gina is the engineering life coach. She works with people who are engineers. She has her master's in engineering. She has a long career as an engineer, transitioned into becoming a full-time life coach, right? So she coaches people who want to either enjoy their engineering career more or to transition out of being engineers into other careers. So she is the engineering life coach. So like when I meet engineers who want coaching, I send them to Gina before even pitching them for me, because like she's so perfect for that, right? So it really helps to have a niche because it helps you capture the people who are looking for just that, right? So even with weight loss, there are so many weight loss life coaches. So the weight loss coaches are encouraged to specialize in a weight loss niche. So my weight loss coach coaches women who want to lose weight and who are in menopause. So I went to her because that was me. I was that niche. I would have never found her if she were just in the sea of everybody who's doing weight loss coaching. So there's so much benefit to, yes, being really specific in your niche. So you target those people specifically. So it's a good question. Yeah, it's a really good question, Janice. And a lot of us push back on it. I did in the beginning. I was like, I want to coach everybody, right? And so when I said I would coach everybody, I got nobody. So I actually kind of but went back to my roots. And now I typically more of the time say I'm an executive coach or I'm a communication coach, because that's what my education and my background are in. And that's what most of the people come to me for. Okay. Yeah. So I'm more of a believer in the niche argument now, and I've seen it. And all of my colleagues in the life coach school in our cohort of 10, we meet once a month. We've continued to meet once a month, and we all talk about these things, and they've all found that they do a lot better when they're clear in their niche as well. It's a really good question. Kelly.
I imagine that you said this, but I just wanted to clarify for myself why you did both the life coach school and the ICF, and what was the difference of what your takeaway from both of those, and how it how each one advanced you to what you do.
It's a really great question. I mean, part of the answer is I'm addicted to being a student. So I was like, I want to learn more. I want to be in another class. So right now I'm in 2 new classes. I'm in Digital Course Academy with Amy Porterfield and Podcast Accelerator with Michelle Soro, which are both amazing. And we're launching a podcast. Listen to our podcast. It's called The Right Questions. It's all about asking yourself amazing questions. It launches October 27th. I forgot to pitch that. So I am like a forever perpetual student. I'm always in one class or another. I love it. So that's part of the answer. But really the big answer for me was after I did the Life Coach School certification, I really loved it and got so much out of it. I was still doing executive coaching for big corporate clients, Fortune 500 corporate clients. And I noticed internally that they were more likely to hire coaches, external coaches that had either the ICF or the CTI certification. So I realized, I thought the Life Coach School certification is amazing. I love it. It's taught me, it's unbelievable. But having the ICF certification gives me a little more credibility in the corporate realms. But I also learned a tremendous amount. They were very, very different programs, different tools, different take on the listening and the paraphrasing and the way to ask questions and the types of questions. Both of them really focused on those 10 skills that I identified in that slide, but in different ways and with different tools. And it was more practice. I had to do 100 hours for ICF. We had to do our hours in the Life Coach School. We had to do a lot of hours. We had to do weekly hours, but they didn't have a specific number of hours that we had to track and verify. And in the ICF, they did. So I got so much more practice. Really good question.
Tell me the podcast name again. I'm trying to pull it up.
My podcast is with my senior consultant for my company, Todd Parker. We're going to have great conversations and talk about life and relationships and careers. It's called The Right Questions, because we're going to bring a question every week, the right questions, and we will be on all of the podcast apps. I'm putting it in.
Are you there now? Because I'm looking you up.
No, we are not. We are still in the process of doing our cover art and our music and our intro and outro and recording our first episode, but it will go live on October 27. And if any of you are interested in doing a podcast, I could not possibly recommend more highly the Podcast Accelerator. Oops, I did it privately. I meant to let me do this to everyone. The Podcast Accelerator with Michelle Soro. You have for sure seen Michelle Soro on TV. She's on Extra and all those kind of shows. Amazing podcaster. And she teaches a podcast class that gives you everything to do a podcast. And our podcast will be called The Right Questions. And it will be on Apple and all of the podcast apps on October 27th. Every episode, we will bring a question that we want you to ask yourselves, a deep question, and that we're going to ask and answer. And we'll be bringing on guests and having a lot of fun. So that's the class. That's one of the classes I'm in now. And I'm also in, I'll just give plugs for all of my fabulous teachers, Digital Course Academy with Amy Porterfield. She is the goddess, the queen of teaching people how to create and sell and market online courses, which good time to do that right now, right? With those of us who are coaches and trainers and therapists, all of it, everybody's in that group. She's got thousands of people going through her course, and whatever people do, they're learning how to turn it into online courses that they can market so they can continue to offer their services in the world in a pandemic online. So I'm in that course and I'm getting so much out of it. I had so much fun sharing coaching with you, talking about life coaching. I hope that you learned what a life coach is, what a coach is, a little bit about different coaching certifications based on the two that I'm in, and the differences between a coach, a therapist, a counselor, a mentor, a consultant, a trainer, a teacher, and the top 10 coaching skills that you really should learn in any coaching program, or if you plan to do self-study, please dive deep into those 10 skills, because those are the core coaching skills. I thank you so much for being here today. We do free workshops every single month, so please keep an eye out for free workshops, and we'll be offering lots of online courses soon too, so keep an eye out for that as well. That will be for a fee, but we're going to keep everything very reasonable as we move into our business really being virtual and selling what we would normally sell to do internally for companies more online. So thank you so much for being here. Great to see you all. Please listen to the Right Questions podcast starting October 27th. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Have a great